Hello everyone. Welcome to this evening's seminar being hosted by me. I'm Louisa McGinn. I'm Chief Exec here at Spinal Research. Just a little bit of housekeeping going into this. We're not going to be able to take questions this evening, but there is going to be a link in the chat so you can ask questions through that, which we will then come back to you on later. We also will be recording the session and sharing it on our YouTube channel. So if you want to watch it again or share it with friends and family, you can do that. So tonight's session is going to be about the really exciting results of the recently published Pathfinder 2 study. I'm very lucky to have a fantastic panel with me today. Stuart, can you knock down a slide? Thank you. So, as I said, I'm the Chief Exec here at Spinal Research, and then I'm joined by Tara, who is our Chair of Spinal Research and was a participant of Pathfinder 2, Rob from Onward Medical, Dan, who was another Pathfinder 2 trial participant, as was Sarah, and then Jenny, who currently works at Onward Medical, but prior to that was the director at NeuroConnects. So you're going to hear from all of us today, just some more information about the trial and about the fantastic things that we've discovered through it. So I think from now we'll just start with showing you a brief video and then we'll move on.
So the transcutaneous spinal cord stimulation works by applying electrodes to the surface of the skin, which sends electrical currents through to the spinal cord, which excites spinal circuits. Those spinal circuits are then more likely to respond when it receives impulses from the brain, when we're trying to do a motor activity.
The study lasts for 120 sessions that spread out over a year. Participants who have completed the study at this point are seeing changes in their motor function, so their standing ability, walking, core control, and sensation changes, as well as changes to their autonomic function, so bladder, bowel, and sexual function. Having onward ARC therapy available to the greater public will make a massive difference to all people living with paralysis. We are seeing recovery in participants who are over 10 years post-injury, and they're regaining function that they never thought possible.
So the benefits I've had from using the stimulator is had different muscle groups come back in my leg, from like my right hamstrings, my hip flexors. Also, I've had bowel and bladder control come back, when I was in hospital got told that was one of the last things that would come back. So that really surprised me that I managed to get that back quite early on in using the stimulator. One of the benefits I did get back from the stim is being able to lift my leg and move it around, and being told that I'll never be able to move my legs when I was in hospital. This is quite a big achievement for me.
Since using the stimulation, a couple of months in, I started to notice more sort of twinges in my quads, and they have just got stronger as the study has gone along, which has allowed me to take my first steps using a walking frame without any supports on my leg, which was, I have to say, when I first had my injury, it was a dream for me, to be honest with you, and something I hoped I'd always do, but to actually do it was quite an emotional experience for me.
I have quite a lot of movement which I didn't have, but what I'm pleased with is the core, which I can balance, and I can do sit-ups, and I got a bit of a six-pack going on. I can working on easier transfer as opposed to transferring with the sling, and then I can move and I can practice my huggy bear.
Since being on the trial, I have experienced much more strength in my core. I think my posture has really improved, and my left tricep is stronger than it ever was before. I feel like I've got a really long way to go yet, but really good start, and really excited to see what more gains I can achieve.
Certainly as somebody with a spinal cord injury, I and people like me have been told so many times that there's no hope and that we can't make a functional recovery, and now to see something like this coming through where people are recovering and they are getting better is just incredibly heartening and incredibly encouraging. And I just, for anybody watching this, I just think it's a wonderful thing to have that hope.
Thank Thank you. And thank you for bearing with us as well as we got through those technical issues. So Rob, I'll hand over to you now for you to talk through the device and how it works.
And you can go to the next slide. Maybe something that I want to start with is that since the study, which ended in the end of 2022, of course, we haven't been sitting still at Onward Medical. So we made a lot of progress to the device that you will see today. It's been super exciting times for us because also the device has recently received approval in the United States, and we're already actively working on trying to get it to Europe. But just to give you a high-level overview of how the device works. First of all, it's an external system for non-invasive programmed stimulation of the spinal cord. So how it works is you have the stimulator, which you can see in the middle, which sends electrical pulses directly to the spinal cord via electrodes that are placed on the back of the neck. The other electrodes that you see on the hip bones, those are return electrodes. So you won't receive active stimulation through there. It's only through the electrodes that are placed on the back of the neck. The stimulation itself can be fully customized. For that, we have a programmer with an application, which you can see on the right. What we can do with this is we can change the waveform of the stimulation so that a specific stimulation that is being used for each individual. And that can be fully adapted to the person's needs. You can go to the next slide. The device as well, it's intended to be used in combination with functional task practice. So functional task practice are rehabilitation exercises that you do that are intended to promote even more voluntary movements, voluntary control of your hands and arms. And these could be different types of exercise. It could be simple exercises that isolate your finger movements, like typing, for example. And it can go all the way up to more complex movements, like grabbing something, opening a cup, opening a can, etc. So these are different stages that you can exercise while being stimulated with Arcex. The next slide, please. So the device has already been extensively studied. And one of the studies we want to highlight to you now is the pivotal study. So this was a study that was used to receive approval by the FDA. The results of this study were published in Nature Medicine. And we were really excited about the outcomes. And I'll show you some highlights of them on the next slide. So what we were really excited about when we saw the results of this study is that we met all primary and secondary endpoints. What does this mean? We basically were able to demonstrate that the therapy is effective and safe to improve upper limb function after a spinal cord injury. We had 65 trial participants across 14 sites globally. The results are really encouraging, what we saw, because 90% of the participants improved in at least one primary strength or function assessment. So that basically means that 90% of the participants saw some level of improvement in the function that they had. We also noted that 87% of the participants reported quality of life improvements. And what was also very interesting and very encouraging is that people that were even injured for more than 30 years saw improvements by using the device. So when we talk about it's supposed to be used with people with a chronic spinal cord injury, which is typically 1 year or more, like here we could even demonstrate that it could be even people 30 years after their injury could still have meaningful benefits from using the device. We also noted no serious adverse events. So basically no serious device-related adverse events. So that basically means that the device is really safe to use, which is also critical for us. The study participants also reported other benefits, like, for example, reduced spasm frequency, improved sleep, and improved sensation in the upper body. What this practically could mean into somebody's life is somebody who's able to lift a cup a little bit more easy, like who can push a button on the remote control with more ease, or pick up objects with a fork. These are simple tasks, but really can mean a lot, like for people who have lost this function. If you go to the next slide, please. Here you can see a short video, and this video shows the impact that the therapy had on one of the trial participants. You can, yeah. So the video is broken out in two different sections. In the first section, you will see the first part of the trial. People only received functional task practice, so without any stimulation. People were just training simple tasks, like here, for example, putting the ping pong ball into the bucket. You could see that even after 10 days of training, there were still a lot of challenges with this. The same participants showed, like, after the first day of stimulation, basically saw remarkable improvements. So we are really excited by seeing this type of results. At the same time, we also want to manage people's expectations, because we know that every spinal cord injury is unique, and therefore we know it can take somebody a little bit more time, or the benefits you will observe from the start will be slightly different for each individual. The other study that now I'm going to hand it over to Jenny is the Pathfinder 2 study, which is the focus of our meeting today.
Thanks, Rob. Hi, everyone. My name is Jenny Suggett. I am an occupational therapist. I have worked with NeuroConnects previously as the clinical director, and I had the opportunity to co-lead this study that we're going to be discussing today. Just for clarification on my background as well, and full transparency, that I do now work for Onward Medical. I relocated back to the US, and I just knew that I wanted to continue to work with this technology after the study and help get it out of research and into the SCI community. And that's what I ended up doing. So I'm happy to share these results with you today. If we can go to the next slide, please. So Pathfinder 2 was a multi-center, non-randomized trial that was conducted across 2 rehab community centers in the UK. For those that don't know, those centers were at NeuroConnects, and NeuroConnects is a specialist rehab center offering activity-based therapy for people with neurological injuries, including SCI. And our programs focus on functional recovery, independence, and long-term well-being. As co-investigator, we wanted to explore how transcutaneous stim, Arcex therapy, could enhance our activity-based training and improve real-world rehab outcomes. We called it real-world because this trial was conducted in active outpatient rehab settings, not your typical labs or large rehab institutes, but in the community where people live, recover, and regain function. As clinicians, we know the importance of making advanced therapies more accessible, and we hope that this study would demonstrate that neuromodulation can be safely and effectively integrated into real-world rehab settings. So we enrolled 10 participants with chronic SCI. It ranged from C2 to T12, and Asia Impairment Scale classifications A through D, so completes and incompletes. And we did so that we could try and capture a range of severities and functional abilities. All participants were injured for at least 1 year, and participants to take part in the study had to complete 120 sessions. Those were completed over a year-long period. It was approximately 3 times per week attendance for 2-hour sessions. The transcutaneous Arcex intervention was applied for a minimum of 45 minutes per session, and the electrode placements and stimulation parameters were individualized based on the participants' needs and functional goals. Activity-based therapy is an intensive rehab approach that emphasizes task-specific exercises, including weight-bearing activities and repetitive motor tasks to really promote neuroplasticity and functional recovery in individuals with SCI. And so pairing transcutaneous stimulation with the activity-based therapy, we tailored exercises to target 4 different areas, and that was trunk, upper body, lower body, and then hand function. And all of the intervention focused on active participation and voluntary effort by the participants during exercises. So this was not an intervention that was simply applied to the participant and then just passively run. Participants were actively participating in their exercises and try and connect the brain boost to the spinal cord. So then on the table here on this slide, This provides an overview of the study population, and this just helps us understand the diversity of the trial participants. So as I said, there were 10 individuals. It ended up being evenly split between 5 cervical injuries, or cervical, as you say in the UK, and 5 thoracic injuries. It ranged from 21 years old to 66 years old, which is important because rehab needs can vary significantly with age. The time since the injury also varied. It had to be at least 1 year post injury, and participants in this study happened to range from 21 months injury at the time of the study to 201 months, which equates to just over 16 years since injury. And again, this allowed us to assess whether stimulation benefits both recent and long-term injuries. You'll see here the injury level and classification based on the Asia Impairment Scale classifications. Participants within the group, we had 4 participants with a classification of an A, so a complete injury, 2 participants with a level B, 3 with C, and 1 with a level D injury. We can go to the next slide, please. Thanks. Okay, so then on this slide, we'll be talking about the improvements in upper extremity function that we saw during the study. So this is specifically looking at the cervical group. So that would be the 5 participants with cervical level injuries. And we observed significant improvements in upper extremity function despite this being a small sample size. So this slide reviews 3 key measures that evaluate hand, arm, and function that we'll be going over. The first is the neuro recovery scale. It's the upper extremity subscore that you'll see here. And this measures overall upper extremity function and looking at strength, control, and ability to perform movements. The 2 graphs in gray are referring to the GRASP, which stands for the Graded Refined Assessment of Strength, Sensibility, and Prehension. The first one is looking at prehension ability. So that is looking at how well someone can physically grasp and hold and pinch objects. And then the third one is looking at the prehension performance, and that looks at more so how somebody can functionally use their grip. So how can they manipulate objects? How can they open bottles and pour water and use their grasp in a functional manner? So the first graph here, again, that's the neuro recovery scale. It's the upper extremity subscore. So each bar in these graphs is representing a different stage of assessment during the study. So the first bar being your baseline, and then every 20 sessions from there. So you've got baseline, 20 sessions, 40, 60, 80, 100, and 120. And what you see here is a steady increase over time, meaning that participants showed progressive improvement in their upper limb function as they continued therapy. If you move to the second graph here, it's following the same timeline of every 20 sessions, and it shows that participants' grasp ability improved gradually over time as well. At baseline, scores were much lower, meaning that participants had more difficulty handling objects. And by 120 sessions, they were significantly higher, showing better control and strength in their hands. And then in the third graph here, again, it's looking at how well participants can manipulate objects in a functional way. And we can see here an even clearer improvement over time with the highest scores at 120 sessions. And so this tells us that the Arcex therapy not only strengthens hand function, but also improves this real-world application of movements, which is critical for participating in everyday activities. One thing that's important to note is that the scores are continuing to improve at that 120 mark. So we, as the researchers, assume that recovery would continue with ongoing use of Arcex therapy. And while this is a very small group of participants and does need to be examined in a larger scale, what we observed was clear measurable improvements in hand and arm function over time. Can we go to the next slide, please? So then here we're going to be looking at the improvements in trunk function and balance. This is looking at the full cohort, so all 10 participants, and showed that trunk function and balance improved after 60 sessions with continued progress thereafter. So here we are looking at the improvements in, again, the neuro recovery scale, but the trunk subscore, and also looking at the Berg balance score. This is a measure that looks at balance and mobility, and also is a good indicator for safety when it comes to mobility and a risk of falls. So trunk control is essential for all postural stability, which is needed in almost everything that we do. So to maintain sitting independently, to do any sort of standing activity, you need to have trunk control. To hold your head up, you need trunk control. And use your arms for anything from reaching, dressing, transfers, you need to have trunk control. So that's why we particularly wanted to look at this factor. And the improvements in balance can also lead to greater functional independence overall and reduce the risk of falls. So in these graphs, you'll see the same time markers of every 20 sessions. The data here is showing a steady increase in trunk function over time, meaning that participants were able to sit more independently and control their core movements better. And then in the Berg balance scale, you can see that improvements again progressively improved over time, and indicating that the stimulation combined with activity-based therapy did enhance postural control. So these findings suggest that ARC therapy or Arcex therapy may have benefits beyond the upper extremities, contributing to improved stability, balance, and just overall mobility. And again, importantly, these gains did not plateau. Participants continued to improve through the 120 interventions. And so again, we're excited just to see what else could be done with ongoing access. Next slide, please. So this is looking at improvements in neurological status. So several participants had indicated improvements in their Asia impairment scale classification and their level of injury. Neurological recovery in chronic SCI is pretty rare, and any change in the AIS classification is notable. And within this trial, we found that the improvements in the AIS classification were significant across our group. So there were 4 individuals who improved their neurological level of injury. As you can see on this scale here, one person went from a T10 to a T11, another T10 to a T11, one progressed from a C5 to a C6, and then a T6 to a T11. Any shifts in neurological level of injury like this usually means that participants gained function at lower spinal level segments than had previously been recorded. And then we'll look at the classification score here, which typically indicates an increase in sensory or motor function below the level of injury. So here there were 3 individuals who improved their AIS classification, one person progressing from a B to a C, one from a C to a D, and significantly, one participant transitioned from an A to a C, so transitioning from a complete to a C level incomplete, which we found to be fairly significant. And again, these results suggest that prolonged use of Arcex therapy may contribute to meaningful neurological recovery in some individuals with chronic SCI. Next slide, please. So our key takeaways and conclusion from this study, as well as discussion, is that Arcex therapy is safe, feasible, and effective in a community-based rehab setting. There were no device-related adverse events reported, confirming that the therapy is safe. Hand sensation, as measured by the grasp, is significantly improved. And 50% of the participants showed signs of neurological recovery. So we feel that continued improvements were based on this longer therapy access, and suggest that ongoing rehab will continue to show improvements. These findings reinforce the potential for Arcex therapy as a long-term rehab strategy for people with chronic SCI. We're hopeful that, unlike traditional rehab approaches, this therapy has the potential to enhance neuroplasticity and drive functional gains even years after injury. And just one thing last note is that future research. This was a small sample study without a control group. So while these results are significant in this setting, future research does need to be done to include control groups and looking at optimizing therapy protocols and just further exploring the long-term benefits for people living with SCI. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Rob and Jenny. That was so interesting. So brilliant, thank you. Moving on from that, I think it would be wonderful to hear a bit more from Dan and Sarah, who were participants in the trial. Dan, I'll start with you if that's okay. It would be just wonderful to hear a little bit about you and when you were injured and how that happened.
So my injury come in 2016. I was on a night out with my friends. My drink got spiked, and the next thing I remember is waking up in a ditch on my own and fell 23 foot off a bypass.
Yeah. Sorry to hear that. And what was your injury level as a result of that?
My injury level was T10 Asia A, and then 2 days before I got out of hospital, I could start to move my toes slightly, so they classed me as an Asia B.
Okay. So going into the trial, obviously that was your situation. Did you have any sort of hopes or expectations ahead of the trial starting?
You'd like to hope, but it's hard to tell because you want that hope, but with having a spinal injury, you kind of lose a lot of hope and you don't believe. But obviously doing this trial, it proving me wrong and proving everyone else wrong about it is a massive thing.
Yeah, for sure. What was it actually like being part of the trial? Obviously Jenny's talked through what was expected of you. What was it like for you doing that?
I enjoyed it really. It's 3 times a week, so it's and you do a lot of the same tasks, but repetition is key. You keep doing something and something will eventually come. And yeah, it just keeps you busy, keeps your mind focused on something. So it's definitely a good thing to have.
Thank you. So I know this was covered a little bit in the video already, but it would be lovely to hear from you again, just what gains you got as a result of the trial.
Yeah, so I got, as in the video, about bowel and bladder, which is for me a massive thing, and I'm sure it would be for anyone else with a similar situation. Just that knowing of when to need to go to the toilet and not having to keep looking at your time or having a timer on your phone. Massive weight off your shoulders, basically, because you can just enjoy yourself a bit more. Also, stronger hip flexors, being able to like lift my leg when walking. Stronger hamstrings. No, it didn't all happen on the same leg. It was on various parts of my body, various parts of the legs. But any movement is good movement.
For sure, for sure. And obviously Jenny, when she was talking through the charts, talked about like the progression. Have you seen gains continue since the trial finished?
Yeah, so I did the trial like 5 years ago, and still, like last year, I've gone from low motor neuron to high motor neuron, which is massive. And since I've started this year at NeuroConnects, I've actually started to sweat below the level of injury as well, which is another massive factor. So although it doesn't happen continuously, over time you'll have like, well, for me personally, I have like 2 months where I get gains, and then I'll have nothing, and then all of a sudden something else will come along, and I'm just like, well, I couldn't do that 2 to 3 weeks ago. So it's like a jump start if you want to look at it like that. It kind of jump starts your body into regaining functions as well. So I think it's really good.
So, I mean, I know you've touched on this a little bit already, but has taking part in the trial had an impact on your day-to-day life, like where you are now?
Yeah, massively. It's given me that extra hope, that self-belief that I need and everyone needs to progress in life. And if you've got a positive mindset, anything's possible. If you believe that anything is possible, things will come back. I truly believe that.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, we do too, very much so. Thanks so much, Dan. Sarah, are you good to have a quick chat as well about all of this?
Of course, yeah, of course.
Thank you. I suppose, again, similar to the question that I asked Dan at the beginning, it would just be great to hear a little bit about how you were injured and when that was.
Yeah, of course. So I was injured in September 2018. I fell from my horse wearing a hat and a body protector, and I broke my neck in the 1-inch gap between the two, and have a C4, C5 C level spinal cord injury because of that. So I'm 6.5 years injured. Yeah, huge, life changing. My children were very young at the time. My youngest was only 1. So I, desperately was hoping that, more function would come back than did originally. And then was offered a place on the trial.
Yeah, of course. So, I mean, that must have been a big motivation for you, wanting that function
Absolutely.
recovery when you took part in the trial.
Absolutely.
And what was your experience like of being in the trial?
It was a fantastic experience. I think, as Dan touched on as well, being in the gym environment 3 days a week is actually a real confidence boost just in itself. Being at somewhere like NeuroConnects is so refreshing because everybody in there gets you. Like, we're all the same when we're there. So if you need, if you want to chat to somebody about, like bowels and bladder problems or anything else, they get it, rather than, the general community generally don't talk about things like that. So it's quite refreshing being in an environment where you can just, talk about stuff like that anyway. But as I say, being there sort of 3 days a week was brilliant. And as Dan mentioned as well, sort of as you start to see gains, however small they feel to begin with, just gives you a real confidence boost and a real, drive to see what else is next, what else you can gain.
Of course. Could you talk a little bit more about what those gains were and if they've continued since the trial?
Sure. So for me, obviously having a high level injury, it was more around my upper body strength, my core and my arms, and using my hands. So my hands still don't work well, I wouldn't say, but they are quite strong. So I'm now able to like lift a hot cup of tea, drink a cup of tea independently, and a lot more strength in my core. So my balance is a lot better. My posture has improved hugely sitting in my chair because of that. I can also feel when I'm not straight or I'm uncomfortable. So that's really a bonus when you're spending a lot of time in a chair. Knowing when you're uncomfortable or not sitting quite right is that's been a big change for me. But having the confidence to go out to a restaurant and eat, hold a glass, hold a knife and fork, those kind of things, it's made a big difference to me, socially as well as at home.
Brilliant, thank you. And do you have any hopes for the future, having been part of the trial?
I would love to see it available to anyone that wants to use it. I do think, if you could access something like that early on in your injury, it would give people so much hope and potentially so much benefit. Yeah, I just wish it was available for everybody. I really do.
Lovely, thank you. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And you taking the time to come and share your story with us. It's great, both you and Dan as well. Thank you. Jenny, it'd be lovely to hear a bit more. I know obviously you've talked through the trial and the kind of the protocols around it. Having heard about Dan and Sarah's experience, it would just be great to hear your, I suppose, perhaps more anecdotal stuff around the trial itself. But it would be really lovely if you could just start by talking about, I guess, what drew you to the trial in the first place, what your kind of motivation was for wanting to be part of it.
Yeah, the interest in being part of it was essentially having opportunity to have access to this technology and being able to get this technology to the community and not just using it in a research setting. So that's what initially drew me in. There's so much, so many times technology is gatekept from the community. And I know as wearing my OT hat that we get frustrated as well, that there's not a lot that we can do sometimes outside of our traditional setting. So having that opportunity, we just ran with it and tried to design the most comprehensive trial, looking at our entire NeuroConnects population and how could it benefit them. And then the question regarding the anecdotal kind of outcomes that we saw, I think one thing to remember for this study as well is that this was a very diverse group, ranging all the way from cervical to thoracic level injuries, complete and incomplete. So while the findings we reported had to have statistical significance, we did report those findings in this trunk recovery and hand recovery. But as you can hear from Dan and Sarah, there were a lot of other meaningful recovery that was achieved on an individual basis that was not shown on a statistically significant level to report for the whole group. And those changes have been really exciting to see and have been very meaningful for everyone, particularly the autonomic changes that they're discussing, bladder, bowel, some sexual function changes have all been individually meaningful. And for me, it just shows that we are inducing some sort of neuromodulation within the spinal cord and central nervous system. And we're not sure what continued access to the product could look like.
Great. So I understand, obviously, from the things that Dan and Sarah have said and what you've said, that different people responded to the trial in different ways and had different results. Could you just talk a little bit about why that might be?
Yeah, well, essentially we're trying to boost the signal from the brain to the spinal cord, and every spinal cord, as anyone with the spinal cord injury or working with spinal cord injury knows, you can have the exact same injury on paper and you present very differently in person based on your remaining function. So the fact that we're trying to boost these signals and the innervation varies so greatly, I think it really influences how the stimulation interacts with these remaining pathways. And so therefore we saw a big varying degree and nature of the recovery among the participants.
Yeah, for sure. And was there anything kind of unexpected that came up that you were particularly excited about during the trial? Or I guess any kind of one main outcome that you were most excited about?
I mean, for us as a NeuroConnect's outpatient center, we're very happy to see that it was safe, effective, and feasible to be conducted over this year-long period. We didn't, at the end, I think Dan and Sarah could speak for themselves, but participants wanted to continue with this therapy. It wasn't a burden to their life. If anything, it enhanced their life. Unexpected outcomes for me. Were these autonomic changes that were being reported that we didn't have the right outcome measures to really grasp the sensitivity of these changes, but the individual reports of changes and the impact on their individual life is really what was the most meaningful from my perspective.
Of course. And then looking to the future, what would you like to see that look like in terms of neuromodulation? What comes next?
More research being done in the community like this as well, so that while the SCI community is waiting for this and other neuromodulation technology to come their way, they're getting access to it and don't have to just be located near a larger university or rehab institute. And then wearing my Onward hat, I'm just really excited that this is now, there's a technology in the US approved specifically for SCI, offering hope to this community, and we're very eager to get it over to EU and the UK. As everyone knows, this is a very underserved population, and this feels like it's just the beginning for neuromodulation therapies. And we're just excited to continue to expand treatment options and improve the quality of life for this community.
Wonderful, thank you so much. I really appreciate that. Tara, I'd like to introduce you, if you don't mind, to the group. Obviously, you're here in your capacity both as a trial participant and as chair of spinal research. Would you just mind telling us a little bit about you and your injury and then your experience as well on the trial?
Yeah, sure. So I also fell off a horse, landed on my head 10 years ago now. So I'm a C6-7 tetraplegic. Yeah, I think my experience of doing the trial was exactly as Sarah and Dan have said. It was uplifting, it was motivating, it was pretty straightforward. I'd also add that it wasn't painful. I didn't know how much the stimulation was actually going to hurt when they first stuck the electrodes on me. I had visions of me doing that thing like you do in cartoons where you can suddenly see your skeleton like through your skin, but it wasn't like that at all. It was probably less painful, I would have said, than FES, if anybody's had FES stimulation. So that was great as well. And to be honest, most of the time when I was doing the exercises, I didn't even notice that the stimulation was actually doing anything particularly. So it wasn't painful. So yeah, you know, very easy to do. But yeah, you know, obviously you have to put the effort into the rehab. And kind of keep on repeating tasks and stuff like that. But generally a fantastic experience and very motivating.
Thank you. Rob, obviously we've touched really briefly there with Jenny on the question of availability and Arcex being approved for clinical use in the States recently. Could you just talk through a little bit about what FDA approval actually means?
Yeah, really excited about that. Like for us, this was a major breakthrough as a company, so I can definitely share more details. What it basically means is that now Arcex can be integrated into clinical practice. So clinics, like you have mentioned, they can use the device and start prescribing it to people with a spinal cord injury. What is always important to note here is that we always can use it in line with the indicated use. And in the United States, we received the indicated use is basically, it should be used for people with a chronic cervical spinal cord injury that is incomplete. And with the objective of improving hands, strength, and sensation. That's basically the focus that we have at the beginning. Hopefully in the future, we will be able to build on this, of course.
Of course, okay. And you can imagine, I'm sure everyone tuning in tonight will be really keen to hear what comes next, particularly what the plans might be for the treatment reaching the UK.
The thing is, like it always, you want to be that it arrives as soon as possible. So, but the good thing is like the process for getting access to another country and making it available for everyone, it's typically a long process. There's different steps. The good thing is we're already working on the regulatory approval. So we're actively working on getting regulatory approval for CE marking in Europe. And based on this, we will be able to access the UK as well soon thereafter. We hope that this will happen towards the end of 2025.
Okay, thank you very much. I know it's impossible to put a time on these things, isn't it? But it's just really encouraging to hear that we're working hard on getting that to happen. Thank you. Tara, coming back to you, obviously this has been a really exciting time for all of us at Spinal Research, as well as for anyone living with a spinal cord injury with this news as Pathfinder 2 was published. Would you be happy just to talk a little bit about Spinal Research's plans in the short term and kind of the work we're doing to help hopefully get this treatment to as many people as possible?
Yeah, so our mission is to deliver restoration function and ultimately a cure to everybody with a spinal cord injury. And I think the important thing to say is obviously all of us with the spinal cord injury know that it takes a whole load of functions. So getting to a cure for paralysis will be a journey of various function restorations. It's not going to be one thing. But I think what's been really exciting about seeing this happen is, this is what I sort of call the beginning of the end of paralysis. And it's also been fantastic to see Pathfinder have so many different effects on people. So obviously, Rob was just talking about what the FDA clearance in the US was, which is very specifically for cervical injuries. But as we saw with Pathfinder, we had it on all sorts of different levels of injury and age of injury, and saw lots and lots of different results. So that's very exciting. So in terms of what we are trying to do, what we are looking at is trying to facilitate two things really: access to the machine across the country, across the UK, as soon as it receives its clearance, so that everybody can get within an hour and a half's drive of somewhere with a machine. That's something that we're looking at doing. And that is looking at both private centres and at NHS centres as well. Obviously, it's harder inside the NHS because we don't have control of that situation, but we are working with our contacts in that. And then the other thing about this, of course, and Jenny touched on this about the smallness of how this has only been tried on a few people, is we really want not just to facilitate access to the machine, but also to facilitate learning about the whole area. And that is looking at data and exercise protocols and feeding back to researchers what we are learning about this machine, because it works on spare tissue, so obviously results vary from person to person. So there'll be some people that it has fantastic results on, and some people that doesn't work so well on. And so you want to know why it works well on the people that it works well on, and what you can do about the people that it doesn't work so well on. And that's the other thing. The third part of this, of course, is that we at Spinal Research know that there are other therapies that are, you know, being looked at or waiting in labs, and we really want to bring those through from the research area into trials so that they can be paired to see, you know, what can boost the effects of neuromodulation if a boost is needed. So things like plasticity enhancing drugs or intermittent hypoxia, those are all things that we're looking at. So we, you know, we're working on the whole area. It's not just this, but this is an absolutely fantastic start. And I know I keep on saying this, you've probably heard me say it's like 20 times, but I think, you know, like many people with a spinal cord injury listening to this, we were told that there was no hope. I mean, I was literally, they told me I had absolutely no hope of recovery. And I think that's really, it's just really disheartening to be told something like that. And I think what we see now is that we can genuinely say that a spinal cord injury should no longer be considered incurable, and it should now be considered improvable. And that is a fantastic thing. And there's lots of stuff. So, I mean, I would say this wouldn't I as somebody from Spinal Research, but you know, we need funding because this area has been chronically underfunded almost because people thought there was no hope. And now there are lots of things that we know to improve breathing function and other stuff as well that we just need to fund to bring through the process that this machine, like this machine, has gone through to start delivering, hopefully, you know, a full cure in time.
Thank you. So I'm going to wrap things up in a second, but it would be great, I think, Tara, just to hear from you, I suppose, on your hope for the future and what you think the next few years might hold.
Yeah, so, I mean, you know, the thing is, again, if you've got a spinal cord injury, and as some of the guys have touched on this evening, even little gains can make a transformative difference to your life. So I think, you know, I would say my hope, my personal hope is in, you know, 4 to 5 years, we start to see some fairly significant function improvements in people with spinal cord injury. And from the scientists that I have spoken to, you know, if we can get funding, and again, I keep saying the thing about the money, but if we can get money into this area, we could be looking at, you know, 80 to 90% recovery of people in about 15 years if the funding comes through. So I think, you know, there's an awful lot of hope, but I think we're not that far out from, you know, making a difference to people already. So that just makes me feel so much better as somebody with a spinal cord injury.
Yeah, for sure. I know. And like, I know me and the team, all of the team at Spinal Research will feel exactly the same. Like, this has been a real breakthrough moment, the Pathfinder 2 publication. But, you know, we're just so thrilled to be part of something that we do hope, as obviously you, Dan and Sarah, have all said, that is bringing hope to people that got told there was none. So
yeah, and I think also, you know, so often again, you see lots and lots of stories in the media, there's breakthrough this and miracle that and cure the other, and then nothing ever gets delivered. And I think that's the thing that's really different about this machine, is it exists, it's now, it's being used in the States. The people on this call have had it on them and seen results from it. It's not something that's, you know, in an undefined future down the line. It's here now. So that's really exciting.
Lovely. Thank you. Okay, well, I'm going to wrap things up then. Thank you so much, all of you, Dan, Sarah and Tara, for sharing your stories. Obviously, Rob and Jenny for coming and explaining the brilliant work that went into the trial itself. Really hope that everyone who's tuned in has found that interesting and informative. As I said, if you do have any questions, there's a link in the chat which you can send the questions through to us, and then either we will be able to respond or the guys at Onward will be able to as well. So thank you so much, everyone. It's been really brilliant. And I'll see you soon.
Thank you.